Okay, let's dive in. We've got quite a bit of material here, all focused on, well, how and why people and businesses too actually buy things. You might think it's straightforward,
Yeah.
need something, research it, buy it, done. But as these sources really lay out, there's a lot more going on under the surface.
Absolutely. Today, we're really digging into, the hidden currents of buying behavior. We're going to unpack all those layers of influence, what's happening inside our heads psychologically, the actual steps involved in a purchase, and even some surprising shortcuts our brains take.
Right. And our goal here is just to distill this for you based only on the material provided. We want to give you a clear, insightful look at what really drives buying. And this is crucial, right? Whether you're trying to make smarter choices yourself or maybe trying to understand how to connect with buyers. Getting a handle on these dynamics is key.
Spot on. And the sources you shared, they lay this out really well. They do focus heavily on consumers, individuals like you and me, but they also touch on businesses. It reminds us this isn't just about, everyday items. It applies to those big B2B decisions too. The Cisco example you mentioned from the start of the material, that's a great case study. A company that grew massively, partly because they were obsessed with understanding their customers, both the businesses and how those businesses understood their own customers. It just highlights how critical understanding the buyer is, whichever side you're on.
Okay, so let's start broad then.
Huh.
The sources really stress that buying isn't just random, it's shaped by our environment. So how do things like culture, social factors, personal stuff,
Right.
how does that lay the foundation?
Well, it really starts with culture. The sources call it the most fundamental thing shaping a person's wants and behavior. Think about the values you learn growing up: achievement, individualism, maybe different views on money depending on where you are. These run deep and really influence what we value and therefore what we might actually buy.
And within that bigger culture, you have subcultures.
Exactly. Smaller groups, based on nationality, religion, where you live, race, these give you a more specific identity. And the sources note if a subculture is large enough or wealthy enough, companies will actually tailor whole marketing plans just for them.
And then there are social classes. That's another layer.
Yes, the sources
Right.
talk about these as hierarchical divisions. People within a class tend to share similar values, interests, behaviors. The material mentions a classic seven-level model. But the key takeaway is your social class can really shape your preferences for all sorts of things: cars, clothes, where you go on vacation. It's about shared outlooks, shared access.
Fascinating how those big factors set the scene. Okay, let's zoom in a bit to social factors. How do the people right around us affect our choices?
This is where reference works come in. Really influential. These are groups you're part of. Think family, friends, work colleagues, or maybe groups you want to be part of, or even groups you definitely don't want to be associated with.
And what kind of influence do they have? Is it just about fitting in?
Well, the sources point to three main ways. One, they expose you to new behaviors, new lifestyles. Two, they influence your attitudes, how you see yourself. And three, yeah, they create pressure to conform. That definitely affects the products and brands you choose. You see your friends with something new or adopting a certain style.
Right, yeah. And within those groups, there are always key people, influencers.
Precisely. Opinion leaders, the sources call them. Those people you trust for informal advice, like who do you ask about the best new phone or a good restaurant. Marketers really want to reach those people because their recommendations carry a lot of weight.
The material also mentioned cliques and how trends spread. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, it draws on communication research. Society is kind of seen as these small groups, cliques that interact closely. Information flows easily inside a clique. But getting information between cliques, that's the challenge for marketers. And the viral marketing folks mentioned in the source, they talk about alphas, maybe they start trends but aren't great at spreading them, versus bees. Bees are the super fans, the ones buzzing about a brand, really spreading the word. To go truly viral, apparently you need the bees.
Bees. I like that. Okay, and speaking of close groups, family. The sources say family is huge.
Oh, definitely. Called the most important consumer buying organization out there. And the sources make a distinction. There's your family of orientation, parents, siblings, they shape your core values, your basic beliefs.
Right, how you see the world initially.
Exactly. And then there's a family you create, your spouse, your children. That's your family of procreation. And they have a much more direct impact on everyday buying, especially for big ticket items where decisions are often made together. Plus, the sources highlight a major shift. Kids and teens now have significant influence. They make requests, influence decisions, and they get savvy about ads really young.
Recognizing logos by age 2.
Wow. That's what the sources say. And by 9 or 10, they can understand the persuasive intent behind ads. By the time they're teens, what their friends do can be just as or even more influential than traditional marketing.
Okay, so the social world is incredibly powerful. What about just us as individuals? Personal factors.
Yeah, this brings it right down to the individual level. Your age, where you are in life that matters. Tastes change. Not just family life stages, but psychological ones too, big transitions. And critical life events, getting married, moving, a new job, these often trigger completely new needs and buying patterns.
And obviously your job and how much money you have.
Totally. Occupation matters. Tech companies market differently to engineers than to lawyers, right? And your economic situation, income, savings, debt, how confident you feel, that directly affects what you can buy and how you feel about spending.
Then there's personality.
Yeah.
And this idea of self-concept.
Right. Personality is those enduring traits, confidence, sociability, things like that. But the sources also introduce brand personality. It's the human traits we associate with brands like sincerity, excitement, competence, ruggedness. And the key insight: we often choose brands whose personality aligns with how we see ourselves, our actual self-concept. Or maybe how we want to see ourselves, our ideal self-concept. Or even how we think others see us, especially for things people will see us using. The sources even mention some people, self-monitors, pick brands to fit the specific situation.
Huh. It's like we have different selves that show up depending on where we are.
Kind of. And lifestyle sort of captures that overall pattern, your activities, interests, opinions. Marketers try to link products to specific lifestyles. The sources mention the difference between people mainly constrained by money, think Walmart's core shoppers, and those more constrained by time. And interestingly, the time-crunched folks. They want convenience, sure, but sometimes they also want a bit of involvement. The sources called it the convenience involvement segment.
That's interesting. Speed, but also wanting to engage a little.
Yeah. And underneath all of that are core values, those really deep beliefs guiding our choices. Marketers tapping into those are aiming for our inner selves, not just surface desires.
Wow. Okay, so that's the backdrop. Culture, groups, our own traits. Now let's get inside the head. The psychological processes. What's going on in there?
Right, this is the internal machinery. The sources use a model. Stimuli come in marketing, environment, and then our psychological processes mix with our personal characteristics, leading to a decision. 4 key processes highlighted are motivation, perception, learning, and memory.
Okay, motivation first. What actually makes us want something?
It starts with needs. Some are basic, physiological, biogenic, like hunger. Others are psychological, psychogenic, like needing recognition or belonging. When a need gets strong enough, it becomes a motive. It pushes us in a certain direction with a certain intensity.
And the sources mention different theories about why we're motivated. Freud, Maslow.
Yes, and they offer different angles. Freud suggested, unconscious forces. We react to subtle cues, maybe symbolic things like shape or size. There's a technique mentioned, laddering, that tries to trace motivations back to these deeper, often hidden reasons. Rapé builds on this, trying to find a product's code, its unconscious meaning in the culture. The Boeing Dreamliner example is fascinating features designed based on this kind of research to evoke universal feelings of space and calm, trying to hit that deep code.
So it's not always just, I need X, but these deeper meanings and drives.
Exactly. Then you've got Maslow's hierarchy, which is pretty well known. We satisfy basic needs, first physiological, safety, then move up towards social needs, esteem, self-actualization. It's about priorities. And Hertzberg's two-factor theory adds something really important. It says removing things that dissatisfy you, like a poor warranty, isn't enough to actually motivate a purchase. You also need things that actively satisfy, like great features, ease of use. Sellers need to tackle both dissatisfiers and provide motivators.
That difference feels critical, especially if you're trying to sell something. Okay, next, perception. Why is perception often more important than reality?
Because perception is our reality, essentially. It's how we select, organize, interpret all that sensory input to make sense of the world. Marketers get this. They use sensory marketing sight, sound, smell, touch, taste to shape how we feel about a brand, often subconsciously.
And our brains filter things, right? These perceptual processes.
Oh yeah, massively efficient filters. First, selective attention. We screen out most stuff. Marketers have to work hard just to get noticed. We tend to notice things related to a current need, like car ads when you're car shopping, or things we expect to see, or things that really stand out a big deviation, like $100 off versus $5 off.
Selective distortion. What's that?
That's our tendency to twist information so it fits what we already believe. If you love a brand, you might genuinely perceive its coffee as tasting better or the queue moving faster. It really helps strong brands.
And selective retention.
That's just remembering the good points about brands we like and conveniently forgetting the good points about competitors. Again, this favors brands we already like and explains why marketers need repetition to keep their message breaking through that filter.
So, motivation sparks interest. Perception shapes what we notice.
What about learning? How does experience change things? Learning is basically behavior change resulting from experience. It involves drives, stimuli, cues, responses, and reinforcement. That last one is key. If you buy a laptop and have a great experience, it works well, you enjoy using it, that positive response is reinforced. Makes you more likely to buy that brand again.
And that leads to generalizing or discriminating.
Right. You might generalize, this company makes great laptops, their printers must be good too.
Uh,
Or you learn to discriminate, tell the difference between similar brands based on certain cues. Marketers play on this by linking their product to strong drives using distinctive cues and trying to ensure you have a positive reinforcing experience after you buy.
but it's not all cold logic, is it? Emotions seem huge here.
Absolutely massive. Consumer responses are full of feelings, pride, excitement, relief. Ads deliberately try to evoke emotions, amusement, wonder, warmth. The sources say emotional appeals can be very powerful, especially if they're tied somehow to the product's function. And think about brand stories that really connect emotionally, then they make you want to share them, right? Word of mouth, online sharing. Companies are definitely trying to bring more human appeal into how they communicate.
Okay, last internal process, memory. How do we store and recall all this info?
Well, there's short-term memory, temporary, limited capacity, and long-term memory, potentially unlimited, more permanent. The sources describe long-term memory like a network, an associative network. Information is stored in nodes linked together. Brand associations, that's everything linked to a brand's node, thoughts, feelings, experiences, beliefs. Companies try to map this out. The State Farm example in the source is good. State Farm might link strongly to dependable, good neighbors, maybe the color red. The map shows what consumers know and how strong or positive those links are.
And getting information in and out of memory.
Encoding is getting it in. How deeply you process something affects how strongly it's stored. Retrieval is getting it back out. Interference is a problem here. Other information can block recall, especially in crowded markets where brands seem similar. Association strength fades over time, but slowly. And crucially, retrieval cues are vital. Information might be in your memory, but not easily accessible without a cue like seeing the package on the shelf or hearing a jingle. That's why in-store stuff works. Making a brand top of mind means making it easy to retrieve.
That's a lot happening inside. So with all these forces, cultural, social, personal, psychological, how does a typical purchase decision actually unfold? The sources map out a kind of journey.
Yeah, they propose a 5-stage model, especially for bigger, more involved purchases. It goes problem recognition, information search, evaluation of alternatives, purchase decision, and then post-purchase behavior. Now, people don't always follow it step by step. They might skip stages or loop back, but it's a useful framework.
Problem recognition, that's just realizing you need something,
Yeah,
right?
pretty much. Triggered either internally, like hunger pangs, or externally seeing an ad for a vacation. Marketers try to figure out those triggers to spark interest.
Then comes the information search.
Right. This can range from just being more receptive to info-heightened attention to actively looking for it, searching online, asking friends, going to stores, active search.
And where do people get this information?
The sources group them. Personal sources, friends, family, often the most effective. Commercial sources, ads, websites, salespeople, they provide the most info, but maybe less trusted.
Yeah.
Public sources, media reviews, social media comments. And experiential sources actually handling or trying the product, also very effective.
That diagram showing the success of sets was interesting how we narrow things down.
Yeah, the funnel idea. You start with the total set of all brands out there. Then narrow it to your awareness, set the ones you know exist. Then the consideration, set the ones you'd actually consider buying. Then the choice, set the final few contenders. And finally, your decision. For marketers, getting into your awareness, consideration, and choice sets is absolutely critical. They need to know who you see as competitors at each stage. The sources also note how things online, like the order results appear, can affect how much searching you actually do.
Okay, so After searching, you evaluate the alternatives.
Right. You're trying to satisfy that initial need, looking for specific benefits. You see products as bundles of attributes for a hotel, maybe location, price, pool. You focus on the attributes that deliver the benefits you care about. This is also where market segmentation comes. Different groups value different
When
attributes.
this involves beliefs and attitudes again.
Yep. Beliefs are descriptive thoughts. This phone has a great camera. Attitudes are your overall evaluations, feelings, tendencies. I like this brand, I wouldn't buy that. Attitudes are sticky, hard to change. So usually, companies try to fit their product to existing attitudes.
How do we actually combine all that to form a preference? Like weighing the pros and cons.
The expectancy value model helps explain this. Basically, you rate brands on different attributes based on your beliefs. How good is the battery life? Then you weigh how important each attribute is to you. How much do I care about battery life? Linda's laptop example in the sources calculates this. Multiply belief scores by importance weights for each attribute, then sum them up for each brand to see which one scores highest for you.
And marketers can try to influence that evaluation process itself.
Oh, absolutely. The sources list ways. Actually change the product. Real repositioning. Change your beliefs about their brand psychological repositioning. Change your beliefs about competitors, competitive depositioning. Or try to persuade you that the attributes where their brand shines are actually more important than you thought, altering importance weights. Or point out attributes you overlooked. Or even try to shift your ideal level for an attribute. Lots of angles.
So you've evaluated, maybe you have a favorite, an intention to buy, but actually making the purchase isn't guaranteed.
Definitely not. Two big things can intervene according to the sources. First, the attitudes of others. If someone important to you strongly dislikes your choice and you're motivated to go along with them, that can change your mind.
Makes sense. And the second thing,
Unanticipated situational factors. Just
Yeah.
life happens, right? You lose your job unexpectedly, a bigger priority pops up, the product's out of stock, the salesperson is awful. Any number of things can stop the purchase right at the end.
and perceived risk is hovering around here too.
Big time. How much risk do you feel? Functional risk, will it work properly? Social risk, well, I look silly buying this. Financial risk. It varies based on the cost, how unsure you are, how confident you feel. Marketers try hard to reduce that perceived risk, think guarantees, testimonials, good return policies, lots of information.
Okay, finally, post-purchase behavior. What happens after the sale?
It's crucial. Buyers might feel post-purchase dissonance, that little niggle of doubt. Did I make the right choice? Especially if it was a big decision. They might actively seek out positive reviews to reassure themselves. Marketers need to monitor satisfaction. How are people using the product? How are they eventually disposing of it?
Because satisfaction leads to loyalty and good word of mouth.
Exactly. Happy customers come back and they tell their friends. Unhappy customers. They might return the product, complain publicly, warn their network. Bad news. The sources mention that good post-purchase communication from the company can reduce returns and cancellations. Monitoring usage can suggest ways to encourage repurchase, like reminding people when it's time to replace something. And disposal is a growing concern, especially with electronics and sustainability issues.
That covers the whole potential journey. But then the sources throw in this curveball behavioral decision theory, challenging the idea of the perfectly rational buyer.
Right. This field, along with behavioral economics, has shown that we humans often make choices that seem, well, irrational, or at least inconsistent from a purely logical standpoint. Context matters, subtle cues matter a lot.
And they talk about these mental shortcuts we use, heuristics.
Yeah, rules of thumb to simplify things. The sources highlight a few. The availability heuristic. We judge likelihood based on how easily examples pop into our head. If you just heard about a product failing, you might overestimate the risk it'll happen to you, maybe buy that warranty.
Okay.
The representativeness heuristic. We judge based on similarity. If a new brand's packaging looks like a trusted leader, we might assume its quality is similar, even with no real evidence.
And anchoring and adjustment.
We grab onto an initial piece of info, the anchor, and then adjust our judgment from there, but often not enough. That first price you see, or a really strong first impression, can anchor your thinking.
Framing also seems key here, how the choice is presented.
Absolutely critical. The $200 phone example illustrates it perfectly. That price feels very different depending on whether it's presented alongside $400 phones or $50 phones. Same price, different frame, different perception.
And finally, mental accounting. What's that about?
It's how we mentally categorize our money. We often treat different pots of money differently, like bonus money versus salary, or money earmarked for vacation versus everyday expenses. From a purely rational view, money is money, but we don't always act that way. It leads to some interesting, sometimes seemingly illogical financial decisions. It's linked to prospect theory, which looks at risk and decision making.
Wow. Okay, that really was a deep dive. We've covered so much ground. From those huge cultural forces down to the tiny subconscious shortcuts our brains use when we buy things.
It really does show just how many layers influence even what seems like a simple purchase. And, understanding these dynamics isn't just for marketers, it helps us understand our own decisions better too.
Totally. It highlights the power of subtle things, cues, our
Mhm.
social circles, even just how information is laid out for us.
Exactly. And maybe a final thought to leave you with, drawing from all this, considering how much our buying seems to be influenced by, subconscious cues, these mental shortcuts, how we think others perceive us, how much of your last big purchase was truly a purely rational calculation, based just on the facts and figures, and how much might have been shaped by factors you weren't even really aware of at the time. It's definitely something to mull over next time you're making a choice.